welcome to another video on Excellence with Sports. In this video, I'm going to be giving, this is not a predictions video, but for each NFL award, I'm going to be giving who I think should be the winner for each of them and explain my reasoning. I'm going to start from the bottom going up. I'm going to start with Comeback Player of the Year. I think this one is unanimous. It should be Joe Burrow. I mean, he only played 10 games last year out of the 17. The Bengals went 5-5, and he ended the season with a season-ending injury. He came back this season. The Bengals started off slow. He played in all 17 games this year. They went 9-8, but the defense was abysmal for the Bengals this year. So you can't put any of that on Joe Burrow. Aside from the first few weeks when they lost to the Patriots, and that game possibly could have got them in the playoffs. But if that outcome changes, maybe some game outcomes of some other games changes. But Joe Burrow had a phenomenal season, led the league in passing yards. Didn't have that many turnovers this year. He had less than 10 interceptions on the season. So I think it's unanimous that Joe Burrow should be Comeback Player of the Year. The next one that I also think is unanimous, well, three that I think are unanimous, then the other ones I think it's candidates that it's other guys that should win these. But for Coach of the Year, I'm going with Kevin O'Connell. Led the Vikings to a 14-3 record. Now, yes, the last game against the Lions, they looked terrible, but nobody expected the Vikings to be this good. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy was expected to start. Then he goes out for the season with an injury before it even starts. Then you bring in Sam Darnold, who nobody's expecting him to be solid this year. Then he turns his career around, has a pretty good season. And Kevin O'Connell leading that defense, having a guy like Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator, having one of the best defenses in the league, having an elite offensive line. And then they finished second in their division with 14 wins, and they're going to be facing the Rams on the wild card. I do think they'll lose, but Kevin O'Connell's had a great year, and the Vikings had a surprisingly really great year. I thought they'd be like a 5-win team. Ended up winning 14. So shout out to Kevin O'Connell. For Defensive Rookie of the Year, I went with Jared Verse from the Rams, outside linebacker. Had a really good season, his first year. And just being able to get to the quarterback, getting a few sacks this year. So I went with Jared Verse for Defensive Rookie of the Year. And I think those Comeback Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, I think that was unanimous. And then speak on Jared Verse some more, because I ain't really speak too much on him. But his impact was undeniable. Like, the Rams weren't that good of a defensive team this year, but when they needed sacks or they needed a big play in the games, and Jared Verse was that guy, and he really stepped up, leading them to the playoffs. And now for Offensive Rookie of the Year, I know a lot of y'all think Jayden Daniels should win it. I actually disagree with that. I think Brock Bowers should win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Most receiving yards by a rookie tight end, most receptions by a rookie, and all-time records, breaking the Raiders franchise records. And he's had a phenomenal season as a tight end. I mean, yes, the team didn't win that many games, but you got to look at the impact that he had, not having his quarterbacks were Aiden O'Connell and who else? Gardner Minshew, if he's still there. Those are the guys he had throwing him the ball, and he had a phenomenal season coming from Georgia, being one of the best prospects in the NFL draft. And his ceiling is super high. He can only go up from here. Like Brock Bowers, I feel like had the best. I think Marvin Harrison is still the best prospect, but Brock Bowers definitely had the best season out of these rookies. It just won't be talked about because he plays for the Raiders, and the Raiders are one of the worst teams in the league. I think they have a top 5 draft pick, but Brock Bowers was absolutely phenomenal this season. Like I said, led to most receiving yards by a rookie all time, then most receiving yards for a tight end, for a rookie tight end all time, and most receptions by a rookie all time. So shout out to Brock Bowers. Then the other two candidates I had, yes, Jayden Daniels is a candidate, leading the Commanders to a playoff berth. He's been really good this year. He's going to continue to rise as well. I enjoy watching him play. And I don't think he'll do too well in his first playoffs, but I think that's just going to come over time. He had a really good season, led game-winning drives, had 3 or 4 game-winning drives, had a spectacular Hail Mary against the Bears. So I had Jayden Daniels a second. Excuse me. And if they gave Co-Rookie of the Year to Brock Bowers and Jayden Daniels, I wouldn't be mad at that because they both had really good seasons. They both made Pro Bowls as rookies. Then the other guy that had as a candidate was Joe Alt, the offensive lineman for the Chargers. Obviously, the linemen aren't going to get that type of respect, But the season he had just keeping defenses away from Justin Herbert, especially early in the season. He had overall he had a really good season. He was definitely impactful. Like the Chargers taking him where they did in the draft in the first round, you probably figured they could trade down and get him later. But the impact he made was amazing for their team. And now they're in the playoffs, and I think he's going to display that impact, helping the run game with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, allowing Herbert to have more time in the pocket. So shout out to Joe Alt. Got to get a lineman some respect. Now for Defensive Player of the Year, I also have 3 candidates, but I'll give it to Jesse Bates, who was snubbed at the Pro Bowl, which is a popularity contest at this point. He's the best safety in the NFC, and I don't see how he wasn't a Pro Bowler. Now I know the Falcons didn't make the playoffs, so he probably, given that the Falcons didn't make the playoffs, if he probably won't win it anyways. But he had a great season, dropping back in coverage. Quarterbacks weren't throwing that ball to the receiver that was being guarded by Jesse Bates half the time. But also Patrick Surtain from the Broncos, he probably has a more realistic chance of winning it since the Broncos did make the playoffs. But he had a great season too. When he was dropping back in coverage, best cornerback in the league. Ended up making the Pro Bowl this year. Congratulations to him. But yeah, when he was dropping back in coverage, you weren't throwing that ball his way. Then obviously, outside linebacker T.J. Watt, he's always up here. Had another good season. The Steelers had, they were 10-3 at one point. They finished 10-7, but you can't really put that on T.J. Watt. He was doing his thing on defense. Myles Garrett could have. Only thing with Myles Garrett is that the Browns were so bad this year. It's like his impact didn't even matter, unfortunately. And Myles Garrett, we know, is still great, still a deserving Pro Bowler. But you usually see those two up here. But I think it's going to come down to a cornerback or a safety this year. And I think Patrick Surtain will get it, but I would give it to Jesse Bates this season. Now for Offensive Player of the Year, this is where it gets interesting because I have Justin Jefferson and Derrick Henry as candidates. Justin Jefferson had a great season. You can't talk about the Vikings without mentioning how good Justin Jefferson was this year. And you can't talk about the Ravens without mentioning how good Derrick Henry was. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins ended up going to the Chargers, and they were able to acquire Derrick Henry, who had a great season. He was right behind Barkley for the most. He had the second most rushing yards this season. So the impact that he had on that team was spectacular. Like I said, Justin Jefferson, one of the top 2 receivers in the league, because I'm going to have to get to somebody else in a second, but he had a phenomenal season. Obviously, the Vikings as a whole had great guys. Jordan Addison did his thing as well. They had Aaron Jones did his thing. But for Offensive Player of the Year, I went with Ja'Marr Chase. Now, they didn't make the playoffs, but he did finish with the Triple Crown. Most receiving yards, most receptions, and most touchdowns for a receiver this season. Like I said, the Bengals being mediocre this year wasn't because of the offense. The offense was electric, fun to watch, top of the league. But it was just the defense was so bad that they got behind so early. They ended the season on a 5-game winning streak. They were 4-8, finished the season 9-8. But they just can't get off the slow starts like that. Every game of the season matters. But I'll give it to Ja'Marr Chase. Now for MVP, if y'all thought the Gerard Mayo thing shook up some controversy, this is probably just as controversial because I don't think Josh Allen or Lamar should be MVP this season. Obviously, Lamar had probably the best season of his career, over 40 touchdowns, didn't have that many interceptions, was really good against playoff teams. And then the Ravens, they had a bit of a tough stretch starting the season, but then they picked it up and they start winning. Josh Allen, I think he was really good. He was really impactful for sure, but his numbers don't match up with Lamar Jackson's. But he could be, and I think last season Josh Allen was better than he was this season. They're still both very deserving candidates, but I would give MVP to Saquon Barkley. Had over 2,000 yards, almost broke the rushing record. Had over 13 touchdowns this year. It's hard for me not to give it to Saquon Barkley. Had a phenomenal season, turned the Eagles around. They ended up going 14-3, led by Saquon Barkley, definitely the best player in their offense. And people say, well, if he would have played the last game, he would have took more games to break Eric Dickerson's record. Well, he did it in nearly 30 less carries than Eric Dickerson. Eric Dickerson had 379 carries Saquon had 345, and because Saquon was so dominant, he set out multiple third quarters, and that was the reason why he couldn't get the record. He very well could have, because he only needed 101 more yards. But that is it for this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know your thoughts on who you think should win these awards that I just gave out. Peace.